String algorithms are everywhere. They underlie both things that you use every day and some exciting cutting-edge research. One of the research areas that makes heavy use of string algorithms is bioinformatics. It studies DNA and genes of humans, animals, and primitive organisms. Genes determine how the organism will develop and which genetic diseases are likely to happen. DNA is a complex three-dimensional structure, and you can see an example of part of it on the left. You see that it consists of two intertwined strands. We can extract many of the properties of the DNA if we take just one of those strands and record the sequence of the molecules in it. If we consider just a few dozen types of those molecules called amino acids, and we denote each of them by a Latin letter, then we can convert a strand into a string of Latin letters. And what we can do next is to study those strings. For example, we can put together a string for a human DNA and for a chimp DNA and then for a mouse DNA. And then we can find the parts which are the same and the parts which differ. And this way we can observe how did the life on Earth evolve, what changed in the genes. Another thing we can do with this is to put a genome of a person with a rare genetic disease next to a genome of a healthy person, find the differences, and then make hypotheses on which mutations in the genes cause this genetic disease, which can help to later cure it. You will hear more about it later in the course from Pavel Pevzner, who has been working in the field of bioinformatics for decades. Moving on to everyday things. Depending on where you are now, you probably use one of these search engines every day. Google in most of the world, Yandex in Russia, Baidu in China, or Naver in South Korea. Search engines crawl the internet and download petabytes of data that they find there. And then, when you type in your search query, they use mostly the texts of those documents in the internet to match to your query. And as texts can be represented as strings, lots of string algorithms are used in the process. Another example is your favorite text editor. When you launch spell checking or are just trying to find something in your text, string algorithms are working. A less obvious example is the software which protects our computers and computer networks. The antivirus software looks for suspicious patterns in the code of the programs that you want to launch on your computer. And the network intrusion systems looks for suspicious patterns in the network traffic. So, as string algorithms are a great tool for pattern matching, both exact and approximate, string algorithms are used in this software. Last but not least, software engineers are needed to implement all of the stuff that I've shown to you, and they need their own tools. If you've ever participated in a programming project within a team, then you've probably reviewed some changes made by one of your teammates. And you used some version control system and a diff tool built into this system, like the one in the example with Wikipedia. And to guess correctly what was changed in the code or in the Wikipedia article without actually knowing what was changed, string algorithms are used for aligning and matching parts of the text. In this course, we will start with applications of string algorithms to bioinformatics. You will hear about that from Pavel Pevzner, who also has a whole separate specialization on Coursera about bioinformatics. You will see how basic string algorithms can be applied to solve the problems which are raised in bioinformatics. And then in the second part of the course, you will meet again with me and we will work through some algorithmic challenges around how to make those algorithms to run really fast and fast enough, for example, to apply them to genomes which consist of millions or even billions of characters, or to the texts in the internet, in your text editor, and so on. Also, in the end of this specialization, you will have a capstone project called Genome Assembly. And there, you will apply string algorithms, graph algorithms, and other algorithms to build the genome from a million pieces. See you later in this course.
Hello, I haven't seen you for a long time since we were working on the change problem. But today, we'll work on a completely different topic called string algorithms. String algorithms are everywhere. Every time you spell check your documents or Google something, you execute sophisticated string algorithms. But today, we talk about very different application of string algorithms. Sam Barnes gave a fantastic TED Talk when he was 16. He was talking about his life, and a year later, he died. Sam was suffering from a rare genetic disease called progeria. Children with this progeria, often with above average intelligence, look old already at age 10 and usually die in their teen years. But for many years, biologists have no clue of what causes progeria, but in 2003, they figured out that progeria is caused by a single mutation on chromosome 1. To understand what pattern matching has to do with this progeria, we need to learn something about genome sequencing. When my children were young, that's how I was explaining them how genome sequencing works. I was using an example of the newspaper problem. Take many copies of the identical New York Times newspaper. Then set them on a pile of dynamite, don't do it at home, and then wait until explosion is over and collect the remaining pieces. Of course, many pieces will burn in the explosion, but some pieces will remain. And then your goal is to reconstruct the content of the New York Times. A natural way to solve the newspaper problem is to consider it as an overlapping puzzle. Look at different pieces and try to match them together, like this. And then, slowly but surely, you hopefully will be able to assemble the whole genome. And that's roughly how the human genome was assembled in 2000. And here, Bill Clinton is congratulating Craig Venter, one of the leaders of the Human Genome Project, on completion of this $3 billion mega science project. We don't need to know much about genomes for the rest of this talk. The only thing we probably need to know is that genome is simply a long string in ACGAT alphabet. I will try to explain how the newspaper problem translates into genome sequencing. We start from millions of identical copies of a genome. Then we break the genome at random positions using molecular scissors. These molecular scissors don't look quite like this one shown in this picture. Then we generate short substrings of the genome called reads using modern sequencing machines. Of course, during this regeneration, some reads are lost, and the only thing left is to assemble the genome from millions, or maybe even billions, of tiny pieces, the largest jigsaw puzzle humans ever attempted to solve. Today, I won't be able to tell you about algorithms for genome assembly, but if you are interested in learning about this algorithm, you can attend our bioinformatics specialization at Coursera or read the book Bioinformatics Algorithms. Assembling human genome was a challenging $3 billion project, and afterwards the era of genome sequencing began. But in the first 10 years after sequencing human genome, biologists were able to sequence only about 10 other mammalian genomes because it was still difficult. However, 5-6 years ago, so-called next-generation sequencing revolution happened, and today biologists sequence thousands of genomes every year. Why do biologists sequence these thousands of species? There are many applications. For example, the next big science sequencing project after the human genome was mouse genome, because we can learn a lot about human biology and diseases from mouse genome. There are important applications in agriculture. For example, by sequencing rice genome, biologists are able to develop new high-yield crops of different plants, like rice, and there are many hundreds and hundreds other applications. But recently, in addition to sequencing of many species, there is also large effort on sequencing millions of personal genomes. The things that make us different are mutations. However, there are surprisingly few mutations that distinguish my genome from your genome, roughly 1 mutation per 1,000 nucleotides. However, these mutations make big difference. They account for height, or they account for more than 7,000 known genetic diseases. 5 years ago, the era of personalized genomics started, and Nicholas Walker is a poster child of personalized genomics. He was so sick that he went through dozens of surgery, but doctors still were not able to figure out what is wrong with him. However, after his genome sequencing revealed a mutation in a gene linked to a defect in the immune system, doctors applied immunotherapy, and Nicholas Walker is now a healthy child. However, sequencing personal genomes from scratch still remains difficult even today. What biologists do today, however, they do so-called reference-based human genome sequencing. Let's start from Craig Venter's genome, assembled in 2000, let's call it a reference gene. And then let's start sequencing my genome by generating all reads from my genome. Here's the app. Some of these reads perfectly match to Craig Venter's genome, but some of them don't. And based on these reads that do not match, we will be able to figure out what is my genome. For example, we can find a mutation of T into C and deletion of T in my genome as compared to Craig Venter's genome. It brings us to a number of computational problems. The easiest one is the exact pattern matching. Given a string pattern and a string text, we want to find all positions in text where pattern appears as a substring. But our goal is to find mutations, and therefore we want also to solve approximate pattern matching problem, where input is a string pattern and string text and an integer d, and we want to find all position in text where pattern appears as a substring with at most d mismatches. I think you already have some good ideas on how to solve these rather simple problems. But think about this. Even if you have fast algorithm for solving this problem, would you be able to solve the next problem, which is to answer the question, where do billions of reads generated from me match the reference genome from Craig Venter? And this leads us to multiply pattern matching problem. Given a set of strings patterns and a string text, find all position in text where a string from patterns appears as a substring. So let's develop the first brute force approach to pattern matching. First thing, let's get our pattern into a car, and let's drive this car along the text. Of course, while we are driving, each time we see our pattern appearing in the text, we report that there is an occurrence of pattern in the text. So how it works? Let's try to drive Nana along Panama bananas. So first letter doesn't match, therefore we need to drive further. First letter again doesn't match, so we need to drive further. Now N matches N, A matches A, but M doesn't match N, so we need to drive further. We continue, 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 and now there is again a match. N, A, N, A. We found the pattern, and then we continue further, problem solved. This approach is actually very fast. It takes only O of text time pattern time, because every time we drive along the text, it may take us up to pattern symbol comparison to figure out whether a pattern matches the text at a given position. And Misha will tell you later how Knuth-Morris-Pratt algorithm allows to speed up this naive brute force algorithm by running an O of text time independently on the length of the pattern. So looks like we succeeded. It can go home, right? But wait a second. Let's see how this algorithm would work for billions of patterns. And it turned out that for billions of patterns, it will take time, text, time, patterns, where patterns is the total length of all patterns. And if we apply it to my genome, then text will be 3 billion nucleotide long, and the total length of the pattern will be maybe as large as 10 to the power 12, So the naive algorithm or even Knuth-Morris-Pratt algorithm will not work. Should we give up? We saw that the brute force approach to pattern matching is slow when we try to match billions of patterns. Let's try to figure out why. So what is happening if we put each pattern in its own car? Then we first drive the first car, then the second car, then the third car, the next car, and next car, and that's why it takes a lot of time. Here's a new idea. Let's pack all patterns in a bus and let's drive this bus along the text. But how do we construct this bus? Let me show you how we can construct the bus for multiply patterns. Let's start from the first pattern and represent it as a path in a tree. Continue with the next pattern, continue with the next pattern, and continue with the next pattern. So far, it was easy and not interesting. We have 4 patterns and we constructed 4 passes from the root of the tree. Let's go to the next one, antenna. Now, the first letter in antenna actually already appears on the way from the root. It is right here. The second letter also appears on the way from the root, and then we need to branch the previous pass into 2 passes to construct a pass for antenna. Now let's do bandana. So bandana, we proceed further, and now we again have to branch the pass. Continue with ananas, again branching, and finally continue with nana, branching again. And what we constructed is actually our bus, which is called trie of patterns. How do we use this bus? How we drive? After constructing this bus, how we drive it along the text? Well, we will use trie matching algorithm, and we will drive the whole trie along the text, and at each position of the text, we will walk down the trie by spelling symbols of text. A pattern from the set patterns matches text each time we reach a leaf. Let me show you how it works. So our bus is now looking at the first letter of the text, P. So we walk along the edge labeled by P. The next letter is A. We walk along this edge. The next letter is N. We walk along this edge. And we found that pattern pan appears in Panama bananas. Next, we move to the next letter of the text and we start matching again. A, N, A, and now there is no match. So at this position, there is no match between patterns and text. Continue further, N, A, once again there is no match, A, once again there is no match. For M, from the very beginning there is no match. We continue further, A, once again there is no match. Let's try here, B, A, N, A, N, A. We came to the leaf, so we found the pattern, but we have to continue further, 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 found the pattern again, continue further, again found the pattern, and now there is no match. So we found, in a single run on our bus, we found all matches of patterns against the text. Actually, I haven't finished yet. We also have to match NAS. No. A. No. Now we are done. Our bus is very fast. Recall that the runtime of our brute force approach was O of text time patterns, where patterns is the total length of all patterns. That's why it was slow. The total length of all patterns is huge in the case when we try to match reads against the genome. But the runtime of trie matching is only O of text time the length of the longest pattern. And typically in modern sequencing effort, the reads have lengths only 200, 300 nucleotide. So it looks like finally we are done. Should we go home? We are not ready to go home just yet. Note that the trie we constructed has 30 edges. But in general, the number of edges for a trie is O of the total length of the patterns. And for the human genome, the total length of the patterns will be in trillions. So unfortunately, our algorithm will be impractical for read matching. Should we give up? We saw that using tries dramatically improves on the brute force approach with respect to speed, but becomes impractical with respect to memory. What should we do? Let's try a different crazy idea. Instead of packing patterns into a bus, let's pack text into a bus. Let me explain how we can do this. Let's generate all suffixes of text and form a trie out of all these suffixes. It will be a rather large suffix trie. For each pattern, we can check if it can be spelled out from the root downward in the suffix trie. So we are building a very large bus this time. Let's see how this idea works for Panama bananas. But let's just start by adding a $sign to the end of Panama bananas, and I will explain later why I add this strange $sign to the end of my string. So we start from the longest suffix of Panama banana and build the corresponding path in the trie. Continue, continue, continue further, continue, continue. So far there are no branching. Continue, continue, and now the first branch in our suffix trie appears. Continue further, there are new branches showing up, and finally we constructed something that we called suffix trie of text. How can we use it for pattern matching? Well, let's take our pattern once again, put it in the car, and let's drive along the branches of our suffix trie. First, we match the first symbol in pattern, the next symbol, the next symbol, and finally we found a match of the pattern to one of the suffixes of the text, which means found a match of the pattern in the text. With banana, it will go like this. We found banana. With knob, it goes like this. Unfortunately, we didn't find it because there is no continuation for B. Let's see for antenna. We go this way and finally have to stop because there is no match for T. So it looks like this suffix trie idea worked for us, but there is one important question we forgot to answer. Where are the matches? How do we find where our patterns match the text? There is no information in the suffix trie yet that allows us to answer this question. Here's an idea. Let's try to add some information to the leaves of our trie. But what information to add? Let's say for every leaf, let's add information about the starting position of the suffix that generated this leaf. For example, for bananas, we will add position 6 because bananas start at position 6 of the text. Let's see how it works. So for Panama bananas, we will be adding 0 because this suffix starts at position 0. Then we will be adding, for Anama bananas, we will be adding corresponding position. Continue, 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 and finally our tree, leaves in our tree, get decorated with positions of these suffixes in the text, and finally when we looked at all suffixes, our tree got all the information we need to figure out where the positions of patterns are, and that is actually what is called suffix trie. Something is original suffix trie that I described earlier, decorated with this position of all the leaves in the text. However, adding information about positions of suffixes to the leaves of the suffix trie doesn't yet help us to figure out where the string bananas appears in the text. So what we want to do, once we find a match, like match of bananas, we want to walk down to the leaf, or maybe leaves, in order to find the starting position of the match. Let's see how it works. So for banana, we ended in the middle of the try, but we'll continue walking, and finally we find that banana start at position 6. For Anna, we continue working, but there are 3 ways to continue working towards the leaf. This is the first one, this is the next one, and this is another one. So in this case, we find that Anna actually appears 3 times in the text, and these 3 positions are shown on the top. So it looks like we finally solved the problem of finding position of patterns in the tree, which means we now have a fast algorithm for solving the problem. We saw that suffix try results in a fast algorithm for pattern matching, but let's take a look at the memory footprint of suffix try. Suffix try is formed from text suffixes of text. The average length of the suffixes is roughly text over 2, and therefore the total length of all suffixes is length of the text multiplied by length of the text minus 1 divided over 2. For human genome, it is huge impractical memory footprint. Should we give up? We saw that pattern matching with suffix tries is fast, but impractical with respect to the memory footprint. How about this idea? We saw that bananas takes a lot of edges in our suffix try. Can we compress all these edges into a single edge? That's very easy to do. So let's simply do this and do it with every non-branching pass in our suffix try. Very quickly, our try gets much smaller, right? So we're almost done. Continue, continue, and finally we construct something that is called suffix tree of text. And since each suffix adds 1 leaf and at most 1 internal vertex to the suffix tree, then the number of vertices in the suffix tree is less than 2 times text. And therefore, memory footprint of the suffix tree, which is proportional to the number of edges in the suffix tree, is simply all the length of the text. This sounds like cheating, because we haven't answered the question, how do we store all the edge labels? They will take the same total length of pattern space that all labels in the suffix try took. However, let's try to do the following. So instead of storing the whole string bananas as a label of our edge, let's notice that bananas start at the position 6 of the text and has length 8. And therefore, instead of storing bananas on the edge, we will only store 2 numbers, 6, the starting position of bananas, and 8, the length of bananas. That will be sufficient to reconstruct the entire label bananas. And we'll do it for all edge labels, and as a result, now you see that suffix tree is indeed a very memory efficient way to code all information about suffixes of the text. You may be wondering, why did we add this silly $sign to Panama bananas? I added it because I wanted to make sure that each suffix corresponds to a leaf. But why do we want to make sure that each suffix corresponds to a leaf? I suggest you try to construct suffix tree for Papa without adding the $sign and compare it with the suffix tree for Papa with $sign, and you will see why the $sign is important. We saw that suffix trees are fast and memory-efficient way to do pattern matching. However, construction of suffix trees is not for faint-hearted, because we need to combine all suffixes of the text into a suffix tree, and the naive algorithm for doing this takes quadratic O of text squared time. However, there is an ingenious linear time algorithm for constructing suffix trees called Wiener algorithm, and it was developed over 40 years ago. And this algorithm amazingly has linear write time of text to construct the suffix tree. So it looks like we are done, finally, after all the efforts. And now I want to tell you about the big secret of the big O notation, something that Sasha, Daniel, Misha, and Neil forgot to tell you about. Indeed, suffix trees enable fast, exact multiply pattern matching with runtime O of text plus patterns and memory O of text. That's the best we can hope for. However, big O notation hides constant, and the best known implementation of suffix tree has large memory footprints of 20 times text, which is a very large memory requirement for long genomes like human genome. But even more importantly, we want to find mutations, and it is not clear how to develop fast approximate multiply pattern matching algorithm using suffix tree. So once again, we are facing an open problem that we have to solve. The previous lecture ended with a rather difficult algorithmic challenge that we will try to solve using the Burrows-Wheeler transform and suffix array. Let's start with the Burrows-Wheeler transform. Allow me to slightly change the focus. Instead of pattern matching, we'll talk about text compression. And run length encoding is the simplest way to compress a text, where a run of a single symbol is substituted by the number of times this symbol appeared in this run, followed by the symbol itself. You may be wondering why we want to do run length encoding for genomes, because genomes don't have many runs, but they do have many repeats. For example, more than half of human genome is formed by repetitive DNA, and the lion's share of many plant genomes is formed also by various types of repeats. But here's the idea. Let's convert text into something else so that our repeats will be converted into runs. We'll start from the genome, then we'll turn it into converted genome, and then we will apply run length encoding to the converted genome, because our hope is that converted genome will have many runs. Let me show how we can accomplish this. So let's consider all cyclic rotation of our favorite string Panama bananas. We start from this one, add this one, and continue. We form all cyclic rotation of this string. And then, after we generated all the cyclic rotations, let's sort them. The dollar sign is viewed as the first letter is alphabet, even before A, so we start with dollar Panama bananas, continue, 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 and finally we'll have a sorted list of all suffixes of the text. You may be wondering why we are doing this, but look at this strange thing. If we look at the last column of the resulting array, and the last column of the resulting array is called the Burrows-Wheeler transform of the text, that you will notice that also our original string Panama bananas didn't have many runs. The Burrows-Wheeler transform of this string actually has many runs. For example, here's a run of 5a in the Burrows-Wheeler transform of our original text. How have we achieved it? Let me explain it by using an example from the famous double helix paper by Watson and Crick, where they first presented the structure of DNA. And these are just some consecutive strings in Burrows-Willis transform of this book, and you see that there are many runs of A in the Burrows-Willis transform of this text. Why there are many runs of A? Well, one of the most common words in English is and. And every time you have and in the text, it is likely to contribute to a run of A in the Burrows-Willis transform, as you see in this example. So our goal now is to start from the genome, apply Burrows-Willis transform to the genome, and we can now hopefully compress Burrows-Willis transform of the genome. And after applying this compression, we will greatly reduce memory for storing our genome. But it only makes sense if we can invert this transformation. And from compression version of Burrows-Willis transform, we can easily go back to the original Burrows-Willis transform. But can we go back from the Burrows-Willis transform of the genome to the genome itself? Is it even possible? We saw in the previous lecture that the Burrows-Willis transform idea will not work unless we figure out how to invert the Burrows-Willis transform. Let's try to reconstruct the text banana from its Burrows-Willis transform ANN B $AA. We know the last column of the Burrows-Willis matrix. We also know the first column because the first column is simply sorting all elements of the Burrows-Willis transform. And therefore, we know all tumors in the cyclic rotations of our string. And if we sort them, then we will get the first two elements in each row of our Burrows-Willis transform matrix. Now, after we know these sorted tumors, we once again return to the original Burrows-Willis transform matrix, and for each such tumors, we actually know the symbols that precede every tumor. And therefore, we know all streamers. We sort them, and now they appear in the same order as they appear in the Burrows-Willis matrix. We once again return to the original Burrows-Willis matrix, and we know again the symbols that precede every streamer. We'll continue. We generated all formers. We sort them again, repeating the same thing again. And this way we generate 5 mers, once again sort, and at the final step, we generate all 6 mer, sort them, and we now know our string banana, banana. So we now know the entire matrix, and therefore symbol in the first row of this matrix after the dollar sign spell banana exactly what we need. We saw how to invert the Burrows-Willis transform, but it was a very memory-intensive algorithm. Indeed, for reconstructing text from the Burrows-Willis transform, we needed to store text cyclic rotations of the string text. Can we invert the Burrows-Willis transform with less space and without text rounds of sorting? To develop a faster and more memory-efficient algorithm for inverting the Burrows-Willis transform, we'll start from an interesting observation. Let's take a look at all occurrences of A in the first column and in the last column. And let's ask a question. Where is the first A in the first column is hiding along the circle which represents text? And you can see that it's hiding right after Panam, shown in green. The next question I want to ask, where is the first A in the last column is hiding along the circle, and maybe it is just a coincidence, but strangely, it is hiding exactly in the same place. Let's ask the same question about the second A. And second A is hiding once again in the same position along the circle, both for the first column and for the last column, right after Pan. The next question we will ask, where is the third A is hiding? And it's once again hiding in the same position, the same here, the same here, and the same here. So it looks like that I's position of A in the first column is hiding at the same position along the column as the I's position of A in the last column. And if we look at the appearances of N, the same rule, you can check that the same rule will apply. So is it true in general? Let's try to answer this question. Well, let's number all occurrences of A in the first column. And then let's chop off the first A, the sorted 6 strings that appeared in the Burrows-Wheeler transform matrix remain sorted because we simply remove the first identical symbol from all of them. And now let's add this chop symbol to the end of each of these strings. We added them, and of course, the strings remain sorted. But these are exactly 6 strings that end in A in our Burrows-Wheeler matrix, which means that they follow in our matrix in the same order than the order we started from. And that's result in the so-called first-last property of the Burrows-Wheeler transform. The case occurrence of symbol in first column and the case occurrence of the same symbol in the last column correspond to appearance of this symbol at the same position of text. And it's shown in this string. Armed with the first-last property, let's try to invert the Burrows-Wheeler transform again. We start with the dollar sign that is located in the first row, in the first column and the first row. It corresponds to S1 in the last column. We know where S1 is located in the first column. Let's move there. And S1 in the first column corresponds to A6 in the last column. So let's move there, and we know where A6 is located in the first column, so let's move to this position of A6. A6 in the first column corresponds to N3 in the last column. And we know where N3 is located in the first column, so let's move here, and we'll continue moving through the matrix according to the first-last property, and slowly but surely we will be spelling our original text. And when we finish, we notice that the memory we took is only 2 times text, and the time we took is simply following these pointers that are defined by the first-last property, which is also O in the length of the text. So we are done. The only question left, where is pattern matching in the Burrows-Wheeler transform? Okay, let's learn how to do pattern matching with Burrows-Wheeler transform. Let me first summarize what we learned about pattern matching with suffix 3. The runtime is equal to O of length of the text plus total length of all patterns. Memory is, in the best implementation known today, is 20 times length of the text, which is high for large strings like human genome, 3 billion nucleotide long. So the question we will try to address in this lesson is, can we use Burrows-Wheeler transform to design a more memory-efficient linear time algorithm for multiply pattern matching? So let's see how we can do this. Let's search for Anna in Panama Bananas. Well, we'll definitely start by noticing that there are 6 rows that start from letter A. But when we look, and please notice also that we are currently matching the last symbol in Anna rather than the first one. This will be important. So there are 6 rows starting from A, but only 3 of them are ending in N, what we need, because we are looking for matching the last 2 symbols now of Anna, which is NA. So we narrow attention to these 3 symbols, And using the first last property, we can figure out where these three ends hide in the first column of our Burrows-Wheeler matrix, here, here, and here. After we found where they appear in the first columns, we know where na appears in the string, and we actually found three matches of na. This is the last two symbols in ANA. Let's now try to match the first symbol in ANA, and we know where to look for this first symbol. We look for them correspondingly in the last columns of these three strings. And after we found A in these three rows, then using again the first last property, we find where these three occurrences of ANA appears at the beginning of our cyclic rotation. As a result, we found three matches of ANA. Let me specify some details of the algorithm that we just discussed. We will use two pointers, top and bottom, that specify the range of positions in the Burrows-Wheeler matrix that we are interested in. In the beginning, top equal to 0 and bottom equal to 13 to cover all positions in the text. At the next iteration, the range of position we are interested in is narrowed to all positions where A appears in the first column. Then what do we do afterwards? We are looking for the next symbol, which is N in ANA, and we are looking for the first occurrence of this symbol in the last column among positions from top to bottom, among rows from top to bottom. And likewise, afterwards, we are looking for the last occurrence of this symbol. As soon as we found the first and last occurrence of this symbol, in this case N, the first last property will tell us where these ends and all ends in between are hiding in the first column. As a result, the pointers top and bottom equal to 1 and 6 are changing into 9 and 11. We narrowed the search. And then we continue further, and that's how we find the positions of ANA in the text. The algorithm that I just described translate in the following BW matching pseudocode. And you can see lines in green describe what we have been doing with these top and bottom pointers. Note that we are using last to first array, and given a symbol at position index in last column, last to first index define the position of the symbol in the first column. So it's implement first to last property. It looks like now, finally, we are done. We have a very fast pattern matching algorithm based on Burrows-Wheeler transform, and it has good memory footprint. The only problem, though, is that BW matching is very slow. It analyzes every symbol from top to bottom in the last column in each step. What should we do? The trick here is to introduce the count array. And the count array describes the number of occurrences of a given symbol in the first I position of the last column. This slide shows the count array, and armed with the count array, we can design a better version of BW matching by substituting 4 green lines that we discussed before by 2 green lines that are using the count array. And as you can see, we don't need anymore to explore every symbol between top and bottom indices in the last column. If you are wondering about the details of transformation in from the previous 4 lines into 2 lines using the count array, check our Coursera course or get details from our book that describes this transformation. So it looks like finally after all these complications, we are done. But there is still one question we fail to answer. Where are the matches that we found? Where do they appear in the text? In the end of the last lecture, we faced the challenge of finding positions of the pattern in text when we try to develop pattern matching with Burrows-Wheeler transform. Now I will explain how we will use suffix arrays for solving this problem. Suffix array simply holds starting positions of each suffix. For example, the first suffix starts at position 13, the second suffix starts at position 5, the next suffix starts at position 3, and we can fill up the end of the suffix array. Here it is. So when suffix array is constructed, we can very quickly answer the question where the occurrences of the pattern are. In this case, in the case of Anna, our pattern appear at position 1, 7, and 9. The challenge, however, is how to construct the suffix array quickly, because the naive algorithm for constructing suffix array that is based on sorting all suffixes of text requires O of length of text, logarithm of length of text comparison, and each comparison also may take time. There is a way to construct suffix array if you're already constructing suffix tree, because, as you can see from this example, suffix array is simply a depth-first traversal of the suffix tree. Indeed, we start from leaf 5, continue to leaf 3, 1, 7, 9, continue further, and by simply traversing all leaves in the suffix tree in order, we construct the suffix array. To summarize, if we construct suffix array by the depth-first traversal of the suffix tree, then it takes O of text times and roughly 20 times text space. And Misha will also explain later how to quickly construct suffix array without relying on suffix tree. In fact, Manber and Myers in 1990 constructed the first algorithm for suffix array, the first linear time algorithm for suffix array that require O of text time and 4 time text space. However, for genomics application, even this reduced space 4 times length of the text is still large. What can we do to reduce it? Here's a trick for reducing the memory footprint for suffix array. I will first ask a question: can we store only a fraction of the suffix array but still do fast pattern matching? For example, can we store only elements of the suffix array that are multiplex of some integer k? Like shown here, if integer k equals 5, then we only store elements 5, 10, and 0 of the suffix array. We have no access to other element of suffix array. How it can be useful? Let me show you how to use the partial suffix array to find the position of matches. When we have complete suffix array, it is trivial. We simply look up at the corresponding elements in the suffix array. But what we do when we only have partial suffix array? Where are these occurrences appear in the text? Well, we do not know, because there is no corresponding element, let's say, for A2 and A. How do we find where it appears? Indeed, we don't know yet where it appears, but we can also ask a question: where is B1 A and A appears? Once again, we don't know how to answer this question because there is no corresponding element in the partial suffix array. But using the first-last property, we can ask different question: where is the string A1, B, A, and A appears? And now we can answer this question because in this case the element of the partial suffix array is present. It is 5. So we know where is A1, B, A, and A appears. Now the only thing left is to figure out where A and A appears, and it's easy to do because if A, B, and A appears at position 5, that B1, A and A appears at position 6, and A and A appears at position 7. So we figure out how to use suffix array for fast pattern matching. Of course, the time to search for pattern will be multiplied by a factor of k, because we potentially can search for up to k position before we find the filled element of the partial suffix array, but k is a constant in this algorithm. So far, we were focusing on exact matches, which will help us to answer the question where the positions on my genome and in the reference genomes are identical. But we, of course, are most interested in approximate pattern matching because we want to find positions in my genome that are different from the reference genome. An approximate pattern matching problem is given a string pattern, a string text, and an integer d. We try to find all position in text where the string pattern appears as a substring with at most d mismatches. I'm sure you can come up with a fast algorithm for solving this problem, but I'm really interested in a more difficult problem, multiply approximate pattern matching. A set of string patterns, a string text, and an integer d is an input, and we want to find all position in text where a string from patterns appears as a substring with at most d mismatches. Let's try to use the Burrows-Wheeler transform again to find approximate matches of Anna in Panama bananas, and we will allow up to one mutation in Anna. We'll start again with finding all rows in the Burrows-Wheeler matrix that start with Anna. Here they are, and among them we want to find rows that contains NA. And among 6 rows that start with A, only 3 of them actually end with N. Here are these rows, and we are interested in them. They form exact matching of the last 2 symbols of Anna to our text. But that's not the only thing we are interested in. In the past it was the only thing, but now we are actually interested in all 6 rows starting from A because we are interested in approximate matches as well. And to find approximate matches, we need to retain all these 6 rows and specify the number of mismatches for each of these rows. Here's that. After we found all rows we are interested in, we use again the first last property to find where the symbol in the last elements of these rows appear in the first column, and they will be appearing here. Once again, we check which of these 6 appearances will match Anna with at most one mutation, and it turns out that one of them actually doesn't satisfy this property because there is a match, but it's a match with 2 mutations, which is beyond our maximum allowable number of mutation, and that's why we are not interested in this row anymore. And then, by applying last to first property again, we find all occurrences of Anna with up to 1 mutation in text. How do we find where all these 5 approximate occurrences appear in the text? We can use suffix array, or more precisely the partial suffix array, and you can figure out how to use the partial suffix array to find approximate occurrences as well. I tried to hide some details of approximate pattern matching with Burrows-Wheeler transform to make it a little bit easier for you to understand how it works. In reality, it is a bit more complex. If you wanted to learn about the details of approximate pattern matching with Burrows-Wheeler transform, you can find these details in our Bioinformatics Algorithm course on Coursera or in our book. Sam Burns had a very rare genetic disease. In fact, there are less than 1,000 people on Earth with progeria. However, there are over 7,000 of such rare genetic diseases, and as a result, about 10% of human population have a rare genetic disease. We now learned how pattern matching will help the doctors of the future to learn about mutations in our genome and will allow them to diagnose many of these mutations. However, even if a child is diagnosed with a disease-causing mutation, in the case of progeria, there is no cure. And this is the next challenge for personalized genomics, moving from diagnostic to new drugs aimed at specific diseases. And to finish this lecture, I will tell you just about one case of a very successful drug that biologists developed based on exact knowledge of specific mutation implicated in a disease. I will talk about a more complex type of mutations. So far we talk about a point mutation when one nucleotide is changing into another nucleotide. But there are more complex mutations that work as an earthquake operating on the genome. In this particular case, I'm talking about so-called Philadelphia chromosome that is formed from two normal human chromosomes. Pieces of this two normal chromosome exchange position. As a result, two chimeric chromosomes are formed as shown here. Biologists figured out how to detect this event, and it turned out that it is a biomarker for chronic myeloid leukemia. And based on exact knowledge of biological mechanism, admittedly it's more complex than the mutations we studied, but it's once again a mutation in the human genome, biologists were able to develop a miracle drug called Gleevec that is very efficient for chronic myeloid leukemia.
Hi! In this module, Algorithmic Challenges, you will learn some of the more challenging algorithms on strings. We will start with the Knuth-Morris-Pratt algorithm for exact pattern matching. It allows to find all occurrences of a pattern in the text in the time proportional to the sum of the length of the pattern and the text. Then we will proceed to learn the algorithm for building suffix array of a string in time n log n. And after that, you will learn how to build a suffix tree given a suffix array of the string in linear time. Of course, you already know how to build a suffix tree of a string, but the algorithm you know is n squared, and that doesn't allow you to take really long strings of millions or billions of characters and build suffix array for them in reasonable time. And the n log n algorithm will allow you to tackle that. So first, let's recall what exact pattern matching means. The problem is very simply formulated. You are given a long text and a pattern that you need to find in it. And you need to find all the positions where the pattern starts in the text, all the positions. And we number positions from 0 in the whole module. You learned brute force algorithm for that, which basically slides the pattern down the text. And the running time of that algorithm is the product of the length of the text and the length of the pattern. What we're going to do in this lesson is to improve this time to the sum of the length of the text and the length of the pattern. First, let's recall how brute force algorithm works. It first aligns the pattern and the text such that the pattern starts from the 0 position in the text and tries to match the pattern by comparing it character by character to the corresponding characters of the text. And in this example, we find the pattern right away in the position number 0, so we add position number 0 to the output. And then we slide the pattern one position to the right, and we compare the first symbols and they don't match, so we slide the pattern again, and again no match, and again, and then we just slide the pattern, we compare the symbols, and if they don't match, we slide the pattern to the right, and then in the last possible position, we again find the occurrence of the pattern in the text. And so our output is a list of positions 0 and 7, and those are all the positions where the pattern occurs in the text. So the question is now, can we avoid some of the positions where we tried to align the pattern with the text, but it actually didn't make sense given what we already know about the previous comparisons? And the answer is yes, we can. In this particular example, we've already found the pattern in the text starting from the 0 position. And that means that when we slide the pattern to the right and try to align it to the first position in the text, we're going to compare the prefix of the pattern without the last character with the suffix of the same pattern without the first character. And they don't match. So there is no occurrence of the pattern starting from the first position. But if we somehow preprocessed the pattern and knew that the prefix without the last character is not equal to the suffix without the first character, then we could just skip all this alignment with the first position in text at all. And the same is true about the next position of the pattern. If we knew that the prefix of the pattern of length 2 is not equal to the suffix of the pattern of length 2, then we could skip also positioning the pattern against the second position in the text. And then when we slide one position to the right again, we compare this prefix of length 1, which is letter A, with the suffix of length 1, which is also letter A, and these are equal. So this position we cannot skip according to this rule. But it means that instead of comparing the pattern to the text in positions 0, 1, 2, and 3, we could just safely move the pattern from the position 0 to the position 3, skipping positions 1 and 2. And in the more general case, we could skip even more positions, depending on what is the length of the pattern and how much of its prefixes coincide with the corresponding suffixes. Another example is when we don't even find the whole pattern in the text, we still can skip some of the positions. So in this example, the longest prefix which is common for the text and the pattern consists of 6 characters, and the pattern is longer. So we cannot compare prefixes of the pattern with suffixes of the same pattern and then decide that we don't need to check some of the positions in which to align pattern with the text. But instead, we need to do the same thing with the string marked in green. We need to compare prefixes of this string with suffixes of this string. And we can notice that the first position where the prefix of a string can coincide with the corresponding suffix is position number 4. So we can just move the whole pattern from position 0 to the position 4 in the text. And then try to compare pattern with the text, and we find an occurrence. We couldn't find an occurrence earlier because no longer prefix of the string ABCDAB coincides with the corresponding suffix. And another example, again, we find the longest common prefix of the pattern in the text. It has length 6, and it is string ABABAB. And for this string, the longest prefix which coincides with the corresponding suffix is ABAB of length 4. And that means that we can move the pattern 2 positions to the right and skip the alignment at position 1 of the text. Now we again find the longest common prefix of the pattern and the suffix of the text starting in position 2. It again has length 6, which means that there is no occurrence of the whole pattern in the text in position 2. But we need to consider the string ABABAB, which is the longest common prefix. And again compare the prefixes of this string with the suffixes. And we already know that the longest prefix which coincides with the suffix is ABAB of length 4. So we can again move the pattern to the right so that the prefix and the corresponding suffix match. And now we find the occurrence of the pattern in the text. To make an algorithm from these observations, we will need a definition of a border. So a border of a string is a prefix of the string which is equal to the suffix of the string of the same length. For example, for string arba, a is a border because the prefix a is equal to the suffix a, and ab is a border of a string abcdab, which we saw in the second example, and abab is a border of ababab, and you notice that the prefix abab intersect with the suffix AB, and that is okay. And we just mark the fact that they intersect with an orange color. Actually, we notice that not just AB is a border, but also a longer string of length 4, which is AB, is also a border. However, string AB is not a border of the same string AB because we require that the border doesn't coincide with the whole string. We need only those prefixes and suffixes which are shorter than the initial string. Now let's consider shifting of the pattern along the text in the general situation. So the first thing we do is we find the longest common prefix of the pattern with the suffix of the text to which we've just aligned our pattern. Then we find W, the longest border of U, so that there is a W in the beginning of U and there is one in the end of U. And we also mark both W's in the text T. Now I suggest to move pattern P to the right in such a way that the first W in P coincides with the second W in T. And that is the way I suggest to skip some of the positions where we don't need to align pattern with the text. Now you know that it is possible to avoid some of the comparisons that the brute force algorithm does. And I've suggested a specific general way to do that. But we don't want to miss any of the occurrences of the pattern in the text. So the question is it really safe to move the pattern in the suggested way? You will learn that in the next video. Hi! In this video, you will see that the method I suggested in the last video for shifting the pattern along the text is safe, in the sense that we won't miss any of the occurrences of the pattern in the text by shifting it that way. But first we need a suffix notation. We denote by s with index k suffix of string s, which starts in the position k. For example, for s equal to ABCD, the suffix starting at position 2 is s2 and it is cd. And for string t, which is equal to abc, the suffix starting in position 0 is t0 and it is abc. And note that again we use indexes starting from 0 for all the strings. Suppose the pattern is aligned with position k in the text. Let's denote by u the longest common prefix of the pattern and the suffix tk. Then select the longest border w of this string u. In the last video I suggested to move the pattern to the right in such a way that the left W in the pattern coincides with the right W in the text. And now we'll prove that there cannot be any occurrences of pattern in the text in the red area between the current position K and the start of the right W in the text. This will prove that the shift suggested in the last video is safe. We won't miss any occurrences by shifting the pattern this way. So suppose the pattern occurs in the text in some position I between K and the start of the right W. Let's move the pattern to align with that position I. Then we can notice that there is a prefix V of the pattern that is also a suffix of U in the text. And so this string V, which is both a prefix of P and a suffix of U, is actually both a prefix and a suffix of U. And also this V is longer than W because it started before W in the text and ended in the same position as the right W in the text. And so V is a border of U because it's both a prefix and a suffix. And it is also a border which is longer than W, but W was the longest border of U, so we get a contradiction with the assumption that our pattern P occurs somewhere between the current position K and the start of the right W in the text. Now you know that it is actually possible to avoid many of the comparisons that the brute force algorithm does by shifting the pattern along the text and skipping some of the positions in which the brute force algorithm tries to align the pattern with the text. But how to actually determine the best shifts of the pattern, how to compute those longest borders and the common prefixes, that you will learn in the next videos. Hi! In the previous video, you've learned that we need to quickly compute longest borders of different prefixes of the pattern. And in this lecture, you will learn the notion of the prefix function, which helps to do exactly that. and we'll study some of the properties of the prefix function that allow to compute it fast. Prefix function of a pattern P is such function that for each position I in the pattern returns the longest border of the prefix of the pattern ending in this position I. Let's consider an example. Here's a string P, and we consider the first prefix of this string, A. For this prefix there is no border, so prefix function is 0. Then for the prefix AB, ending in the position number 1, there is also no border because A is not equal to B, and so the prefix function is again 0. For prefix ABA, ending in position 2, the longest border has length 1 and it is border A. For the string ABAB, the longest border is AB of length 2. And for the next prefix, the longest border is already of length 3, and although the prefix ABA and the suffix ABA intersect, this is still a valid border. And for the next string, the longest border is ABAB of length 4. And then we meet character C, and the prefix function begins from 0 again, because there is no border for the string ABABABC. And for the next string, the longest border is A, for the next one again A, and for the last one AB. So here is the prefix function. Now we will prove a useful property of the prefix function, that the prefix ending in position I has a border of length s of I plus 1 minus 1. To see that, let's first consider the longest border W of the next prefix ending in position I plus 1. W has length exactly s of I plus 1 by definition of the prefix function. Let's consider the last character of W and cut it out. What's left, denoted by W prime, is a border of the prefix ending in position I, and its length is exactly s of I plus 1 minus 1. So we've just proved the property. So we see that prefix ending in I has a border of length s of I plus 1 minus 1, and it means that the longest border of the prefix ending in position I is at least s of I plus 1 minus 1. And from this we get an immediate corollary that the prefix function cannot grow very fast when moving from position to the next position. In particular, it cannot increase by more than 1. As we saw in the example, it can of course decrease or stay the same, but it cannot increase by more than 1 from position to the next position. In the algorithms to follow, we will need to efficiently go through all the borders of a prefix of pattern. And this lemma helps us with that. It says that all the borders of some prefix of the pattern, but for the longest one, are borders of this longest border in turn. And to see that, let's look at the longest border and at some border U of the prefix, which is shorter than the longest border. And then we can see that this border U is both a prefix and the suffix of the longest border. And it is also shorter than the longest border. So U is indeed a border of the longest border of the prefix ending in position I. And the useful corollary from that is that all the borders of any prefix of pattern can be enumerated in the following simple way. First, we take the longest of the borders. And then we find the longest border of that string. And then we find the longest border of that string, and so on until we get an empty string as a border. And by the end, we have gone through all the borders of the initial prefix of the pattern. And to go from any prefix to its longest border, we just need to use the prefix function. And then again the prefix function for that prefix of P. And then the prefix function for that prefix of P. And so on. So if we know the prefix function of the pattern, we can go through all the borders of any prefix of the pattern in an efficient way, going only through the borders and not encountering any other positions in the pattern. Now let's think how to compute the prefix function. We know that s of 0 is 0 because the prefix ending in position 0 has length 1 and has no non-empty borders. Now to compute s of I plus 1, if we already know the values of the prefix function for all the previous positions, let's consider the longest border of the prefix ending in position I. And let's look at the character in position I plus 1 and the character right after the prefix with length s of I. If those characters are equal, then s of I plus 1 is at least s of I plus 1, because we can just increase the length of the border. And that means that s of I plus 1 is exactly equal to s of I plus 1, because we've learned that the prefix function cannot grow by more than 1 from position to the next position. But if those characters are different, then everything is a bit more complex. So we know that there is a border of the prefix ending in position I that has length exactly s of I plus 1 minus 1. So if we find that border, then the next green character after it will be the same as the character in position I plus 1. It will be the same x. So what we need to do is we need to go through all the borders of the prefix ending in position I by decreasing length. And as soon as we find some border that the next character after it is the same as the character in position I plus 1, we can compute s of I plus 1 as the length of that border plus 1. So now we basically have the algorithm for computing all the values of the prefix function. We start with initializing s of 0 with 0, and then we go and compute each next value of s. If the character s of I plus 1 is equal to the character right after the previous border, then we just increase the value of the prefix function by 1 and go ahead. If those characters are different, we go to the next longest border of the prefix ending in position I using prefix function and look at the next character after it. If it coincides with the character in position I plus 1, then we found the answer. Otherwise, we again go to the next longest border using the prefix function and look at the next character after it, and so on. At some point, we may come to the situation that the longest border is empty, and then we'll need to compare the character in position I plus 1 with the character in position 0. And either they are the same and then the prefix function is 1, or they are different and then the prefix function has the value of 0. Now you know a lot of useful properties of the prefix function, but we still don't know exactly how to compute all of its values, and you will learn that in the next video. Hi, in this video you will learn how to efficiently compute all the values of the prefix function in an efficient way. We start with an example. We are given a pattern P and we want to compute its prefix function s. We start with position 0 and we fill in 0, and s of 0 is always 0 because the prefix of pattern ending in position 0 has length 1 and has no non-empty borders. Then we move on to the character in position 1, which is b, and we compare it with the next character after the end of the previous border. But the end of the previous border was before the pattern P starts, so the next character is A, and we compare A with B, they're different. And so the value of the prefix function is again 0, because we cannot take a border of the empty border. And so we have to acknowledge that the prefix function is again 0. Now we look at the next character, A, and we look at the next character after the end of the previous border, which is again the A in position 0. And we see that these characters are the same. So we increase the previous value of s by 1, and our value of prefix function for position 2 is 1. And now our current border is of length 1, and it contains just the letter A in position 0. And we look at the next character, which is B, and we need to compare it with the character right after the end of the current border, which is the B in position 1. And those characters are the same, so we increase the length of the previous border by 1, and we write down that s of 3 is equal to 2. And our current border is of length 2, and it is AB. Now we look at the next character A. We need to compare it with the next character after the current border, which is A in position 2, and they're the same, so we again increase the value of our prefix function by A, and we increase the length of the current border, and it becomes ABA. The next character is B. We need to compare it with the next character after the end of our border, and they're again the same, so we increase the value of our prefix function by 1, and it becomes 4. And our border is ABAB. Now we look at the character C. We need to compare it with the next character after the end of the current border, and they're different. So what we need to do is to take the longest border of our current border, and we'll look at position 3, and S of 3 is 2, and so the longest border of AB is just AB. And now we need to compare our current character C with the next character after the end of that border, which is A, and they're again different, so we need to take the longest border of our current border, and that has length 0, so that will be empty string. And so now we need to compare our current character with the first character of the pattern, which is A, and they're again different, so we write down that our prefix function is 0. We move on to the next character A. We compare it with the next character after the end of the border, which is the first character of pattern, and they're the same, so we write down 1 as the value of our prefix function. Now the border has length 1, it is just string A. We look at the next character A, and we compare it with the character right after the end of the current border. They're different, so we need to take the longest border of our current border, which is empty string, and so we need to compare our current character with the first character of the pattern. They're the same, so we write down 1 as the value of our prefix function, and our current border has length 1. And finally, we go to the symbol B in the end of the pattern, and we need to compare it with B in position 1. They are the same, so we increase the value of the prefix function by 1 and write down 2 as the value of the prefix function for the last position. This was how the computation of the prefix function values works on an example. And now let's look at the pseudocode which can compute these values for any string P. It will return an array of values S, which has the length the same as the length of the string, and which will contain the values of the prefix function for positions from 0 to length of the string -1. We start by initializing this array, and we write down S of 0 equal to 0, as I explained, and we also need additional variable border, which will contain the length of the current border at all times. And then this for loop, where position I goes from 1 to the last position in the string, will actually compute S of I. And first we need to look at our current character, P of I, and we need to compare it with the character right after the end of our current border. For example, if the length of our current border is 2, then the border itself contains characters in positions 0 and 1. And so the next character right after the end of the current border is in position 2. And this is why we compare character in position I, P of I, with the character in position border, P of border. So we compare them, and as soon as they are the same, we know what to do. But if they're different, we need to take the border, the longest border of our current border. How to do that? Our current border ends in position border -1, and we know that the length of its longest border is contained in the corresponding value of the prefix function. So we assign value S of border -1 to our variable border. And we only end this while loop if either current character P of I is the same as the character P of border, or our border became empty string. After that, we compare our current character again with the character in position border, and either they are the same, then we increase our current border by 1, and that is the value we need to assign to our prefix function, or they are still different after border became 0, and so our current prefix function value should be 0. And in the end of the for loop iteration, we just assign the value to the prefix function. In the end, we return the array with values of the prefix function. And we state that this algorithm runs in linear time. Why is that? Well, let's first forget for a moment about the inner while loop. Then what we are left with is initialization, which obviously works in linear time, and a for loop with linear number of iterations, and everything inside for loop but for the while loop, for which we don't account now, runs in constant time. So everything but for the inner while loop works in linear time. Now, on each iteration of the for loop, the while loop could take, in theory, as many as linear number of iterations, and if we sum all that up, that would be quadratic in the length of the pattern.
And now we will bound the total number of the while loop iterations by big O of the length of the pattern. And to do that, we will consider the graph of the values of the prefix function. Here, the horizontal axis contains positions in the string, and vertical axis contains values of the prefix function. The graph always starts in point 0, 0, because s of 0 is 0. And it can stay the same, it can increase, it can decrease, but it never becomes less than 0, because prefix function is always non-negative by definition. And also, it can never increase by more than 1 on each iteration. And our variable border in the code behaves the same way. It can be increased by at most 1 on each for loop iteration, but after each successful iteration of the inner while loop, it gets decreased by at least 1, because we consider the current border, we look at the next character, and if it's different from the character in position I, we take the longest border of our current border, which is strictly shorter. So our border value decreases. And so, all in all, border can increase at most length of the pattern times, and it is decreased by at least 1 on each iteration of the while loop. And border is also always non-negative. It means that it can be decreased at most big O of length of the pattern times, and so there are at most linear number of while loop iterations in total. So now you know how to compute prefix function efficiently in linear time in the length of the pattern, but how to actually solve the initial problem, how to find the pattern in the text. That you will finally learn in the next video. Hi! In this video you will finally learn the Knuth-Morris-Pratt algorithm that allows to find all the occurrences of a pattern in the text in the time linear in terms of the length of the pattern and length of the text. So instead of the product of those lengths, as in the brute force algorithm, we will need just sum of those lengths to find all the occurrences. The algorithm goes as following. First, we create a new long string S, which consists of the pattern, the text, and between them we insert a special character called $, which is basically any character that is absent from both pattern and text. It can not be specifically the character $, it is just a placeholder for some character that is absent from both pattern and the text. After we've assembled this long string S, we need to compute its prefix function. And after we've computed its prefix function, we need to look in the positions in the string S, which are inside the text part of it. So we look at all positions I such that I is more than length of the pattern, so after the pattern and after the $. And if the prefix function for that position is equal to the length of the pattern, then we know that there is an occurrence of the pattern in text ending in that position. For example, here we have a prefix function value of 4, and we have an occurrence of the pattern ending in the corresponding position. We need to find all the positions where the pattern starts in the text. So from the position where it ends, we need to compute the position where it starts, and to do that we need to subtract length of the pattern minus 1, but that would be the position in S. And to compute the position in the text, we also need to subtract the length of the pattern and 1 for the $. So in total, we need to subtract 2 length of the pattern from the position in the string S to find the starting position of the pattern in the initial text. And there is another place where prefix function of string big S is equal to the length of the pattern. And again, there is an occurrence of the pattern ending in that position. And why this algorithm even works? First, we need to notice that the prefix function for this string big S is always less than or equal to the length of the pattern. Because of the $sign, it occurs right after the end of the pattern, so if the border was bigger, we would need to have another occurrence of $, in the string big S. But $, is only between pattern and the text, and it's absent from the text, so prefix function cannot be bigger than the length of the pattern. If we look at the position I, which is to the right from the $, and the prefix function is equal to the length of the pattern, then it means that the pattern is a border of the corresponding prefix of S. and so it ends in position I. And we only need to determine the position in which it starts in the text T, and to do that we need to do a few computations, and we will see that this position is I minus 2 length of the pattern. However, if the prefix function in some position I is strictly less than the length of the pattern, then it means that the pattern doesn't end in that position in the string S. And that means that it doesn't end in the corresponding position in the text. And that means that we found all the positions in which the pattern ends in the text, and so we've of course also found all the positions where it starts in the text by subtracting 2 length of pattern from each such position. So the pseudocode for this algorithm is already pretty simple. We take as input pattern P and text T. We assemble string S by concatenating pattern with special symbol $, and with the text. Then we compute the prefix function of this long string S. We initialize the resulting list of positions where pattern occurs in the text, and we go through all the positions I in S, which are to the right from the $sign. And if at some position we see that the value of the prefix function is the same as the length of the pattern, we just append I minus 2 length of the pattern to the result, and we return this resulting list of positions in the end. This algorithm is already pretty simple, and it works in time proportional to sum of the length of the pattern and the text. To prove that, we know that string S can be built in the time proportional to sum of the length of strings P and T. Computing prefix function is done in the proportional time, and the for loop runs through part of the string, so it also runs in time proportional to sum of the length of the pattern and the text. In conclusion, you now know the Knuth-Morris-Pratt algorithm for exact pattern matching. You can find all occurrences of the same pattern in all of the text, in time linear in terms of the length of the pattern and length of the text. You can also compute prefix function of any string in linear time. And you can go through all the borders of any string in the order of decreasing length using prefix function. And in the next lessons we will learn how to build suffix array and suffix tree in time n-log n, which will allow you to find many different patterns in the same text even faster than if you use algorithms like Knuth-Morris-Pratt. Hi! In this lesson you will learn how to build a suffix array of a string in time n-log n. Suffix array is a useful data structure that you've already used in the previous modules, but now you will learn how to build it really fast. And first we will recall what is a suffix array. So the problem of construction of a suffix array is very simple. You're given a string and you need to sort all of its suffixes in lexicographic order. However, as we will soon see, you won't need to actually compute all the suffixes and then sort them and output all of them, because that will use too much both time and memory. You will just need to know in which order are those suffixes, and the suffixes themselves sorted in lexicographic order are only in our head. They're not stored anyway in the program. So we assume that the alphabet from which our strings are built is ordered, so that any two characters we can say which one of them is smaller. For example, in English we can order all the characters from A to Z, and in a binary alphabet we just have 0 and 1, and 0 is less than 1. By definition, a string S is smaller than a different string T if either S is a prefix of T or S and T coincide from beginning up to some character, and then the next character in S is smaller than the corresponding character in T. For example, if S is AB and T is BC, then they don't coincide, but the first character is already different, and the character in S is A, and the character in T is B. A is less than B, so S is less than T. And in the second example, S and T coincide for the first two characters, and then the third character C is less than character D, so S is smaller than T. And in the third case, S is a prefix of T, but it is different from T, so S is smaller than T. And here is an example of suffix array. We have a string S, and all the suffixes ordered in lexicographic order are A, AA, and so on. So here are exactly 6 suffixes because the length of the string s is 6, and so we have 6 different suffixes. We want to avoid this case when s is a prefix of t, and that is why s is less than t, because this case is different from all others. Usually you just compare s and t from the first character and go to the right until they differ, and then see which character is smaller. And this is a corner case when you go up to the end of the s, and then you see that there is nothing there, and so that is why s is smaller. So to avoid using that rule at all, we will append a special character called $, to the end of the string for which we will build a suffix array. So all the suffixes will have this $, on the end. And now, if initially some suffix was a prefix of another suffix, now it is just smaller by the usual rule, because as soon as it ends, and it is still coinciding with the prefix of the bigger suffix, the next character in the smaller one is $, which is smaller than all other characters, and so we can determine by the usual rule that the smaller suffix is actually smaller. So how the suffix array changes in this case? We have initial string s, a, b, a, b, a, a, and we append $, to the end, and we get s prime. And now all the suffixes in the lexicographic order of string s prime are $, a$, and so on. And if we just remove $, from the end of each of these strings, we'll have the suffix array of the initial string s preceded by empty string. So building a suffix array for s prime is giving us a suffix array for string s right after removing the empty string from it. What about storing the suffix array? Suppose we have some algorithm to compute it. How are we going to store? We want our suffix array to be stored in linear memory, but the total length of all suffixes is a sum of arithmetic progression from 1 to the length of the string, which is quadratic. And so it will take too much memory to store the suffix array, even if we can compute it fast. So we need to store only the order of the suffixes, not the suffixes themselves. And the order is just a permutation of numbers, and the number of those numbers is length of the string. So that will take only linear time. And so that is what we mean by suffix array, this order. So it will be just an array of positions. And all the positions are from 0 to length of the string minus 1. And the array has length equal to the length of the string. Now let's look at an example of such order. So we have initially string s, which is a, b, a, b, a, $, and we number all its suffixes by their starting positions. For example, a, b, a, $, is 0, and a, b, a, $, is 2. And we will store the order of the suffixes in an array order. So the smallest suffix is just $, because $, is smaller than any other characters. So the first suffix in the order is suffix number 6. And the next one is $, which is number 5, and then a$, which is number 4, and then a$, which is 2, then 0, then 3, and then 1. So this is the kind of array which we call suffix array, which is the order of all the suffixes of the initial string. And we don't store the suffixes themselves. However, if we need to look at, for example, the third character of the second suffix in order, we can first go into the array order, find out which suffix is number 2, and that will be the first position of that suffix in the string. And if we then add 2 to that, we'll get character at position 2 in that suffix. So in theory, we can look at any character of any suffix really efficiently, although we don't store those suffixes directly. Okay, now you know how to store the suffix array and how to manipulate it efficiently, but you probably wonder how to actually construct it, and you will learn that in the next few videos. In this video, you will learn in general how to efficiently construct suffix array, what are the steps and the sub-steps, and we will work out the details in the next few videos. First, we need to go from suffixes to cyclic shifts. A cyclic shift of a string is string we get if we write our initial string around the circle and then start from any position and go through the whole circle. So for the initial string AB, AB, AA$, we can write down all those 7 characters around the circle, and then we will have the following cyclic shifts. The initial string, the string BA, BAA$A, which we get if we start from character B, and so on, moving around the circle. So these are the 7 cyclic shifts of the initial string. And if we sort cyclic shifts instead of suffixes, let's see what happens. So these are all the cyclic shifts. Let's suppose we somehow managed to sort them in lexicographic order, and then we remove all the characters after the first occurrence of $, in each of those cyclic shifts. What we get is actually the suffix array we wanted. All those strings in the 3rd column are suffixes of s in the sorted order. And so this is actually always true. We have a lemma that after adding to the end of the string s character $, which is smaller than all other characters in that string, sorting cyclic shifts of the string and sorting the suffixes of the string is equivalent. We won't prove this lemma, we'll leave this as an exercise, we'll just use it in the following. Apart from total full cyclic shifts, which go the full circle starting from some position in the circular string s, we will also need partial cyclic shifts. And those are basically substrings of cyclic string s. So you can take any position in the cyclic string and go a few characters in the order, in the clockwise order from there, and you will get a partial cyclic shift. For example, if we take the same initial string and want to build all cyclic shifts of length 4, we can start from the first character A and we'll get AB, AB, or we can start from B and get BA, BA, and so on. We will have again 7 different cyclic shifts of length 4 ending in the $ABA. Note that we only go in the clockwise order, because this is the order in which our cyclic string s is written around the circle. So the general strategy for constructing a suffix array of the string s is we start with a simple task. We sort all the single characters of the string s. And those single characters are actually partial cyclic shifts of length 1. So we assign L to 1, and now we have our base. We have sorted all the cyclic shifts of length L. And then we will do iterations. While L is still less than the length of the string, we will use our order of cyclic shifts of length L to sort the cyclic shifts of twice the length. And we will do that efficiently using the order of the current cyclic shifts of length L. And thus we will increase the length of the sorted suffixes twice. And then we will again increase it twice, and so on. And at some point L will be greater than or equal to the length of the initial string s. And then we will have sorted the cyclic shifts of length greater than or equal to the length of the initial string, and the order of those cyclic shifts is the same as the order of the full cyclic shifts of the initial string. So this is the general strategy how we'll build the suffix array of the string. Now let's look at an example of application of this general strategy in practice. We use the same string in all the examples. So this is our string, and we start with sorting the partial cyclic shifts of length 1, which is just single characters of this string. And the smallest is $, then go 4 instances of letter A, and then 2 instances of letter B. And 6 is the position of $in the string, 0, 2, 4, and 5 are the positions of letters A, and 1 and 3 are the positions of letters B. In this case, the order of the partial cyclic shifts is 6, 0, 2, 4, 5, 1, and 3. And on the next step, we go from cyclic shifts of length 1 to cyclic shifts of length 2, and their order changes. First goes $A, because $, is the smallest character, and then goes $A, and then AA, then 2 instances of AB, then 2 instances of BA. And the order in this case is already 6, 5, 4, 0, 2, 1, 3. and that's because dollar is in position 6, and then A after which there is a dollar is in position 5, and then A after which there is an A is in position 4, and so on. On the next step, we go from cyclic shifts of length 2 to cyclic shifts of length 4, and we get $ABA and so on up to BABA. And the order changes again. It is 6, 5, 4, 2, 0, 3, 1. And on the last step, we go from these partial cyclic shifts of length 4 to partial cyclic shifts of length 8, which are already longer than the initial string. And we start from $ABA, BAA, dollar, and end with BA, BAA, $AB. And the order actually didn't change in this case. And now we have the order of cyclic shifts of length 8, which is the same as the order of the full cyclic shifts of the string S, which is in turn the same as the order of the suffixes of the string. So if we remove everything after the first occurrence of dollar in all those partial cyclic shifts, we will get the order of the suffixes of the initial string S. And so order is now our suffix array. And in the next video, we will start working through the details of this general strategy. Hi! In this video, you will learn the algorithms used in the initialization phase of the suffix array construction. And those are sorting of the single characters of the initial string and also computing equivalence classes of those characters. First, we know that we assume the alphabet is finite, and we can use thus counting sort to compute order of the characters. You probably remember counting sort from the first course, Algorithmic Toolbox. If you don't, I encourage you to go through those lectures once again, because we will use counting sort twice in the construction of the suffix array, in the initialization phase and in the transfer phase. Here is the pseudocode for the procedure sort characters, which takes string as an input and returns the order of the characters of that string as the output. We start with initializing that order as an array of size equal to the length of the string. And we will also need another array count used in the counting sort, which will initialize with zeros and which has size equal to the size of the alphabet, not the size of the string, but the size of the alphabet. And then what we have in the following two for loops is just the familiar code for the precomputation phase of the counting sort. We count the number of occurrences of each of the characters in the string, and then we also compute the partial sums of that array. And then in the end, we go from the right to left in our string S. We look at the character, and we know that the partial sums array contains the position after the position where this character should be in the order. So we decrease the counter by 1, and we save our character position in the corresponding cell of the array order. And in the end, we just return the order of the character. So this is just an implementation of the counting sort as applied to characters of string S. And it works in time proportional to length of the string plus size of the alphabet, because we know that this is the running time of the counting sort for length of S items, each of which can take only size of the alphabet different values. And I need to note here that typically the size of the alphabet is small, like for example 4 letters for strings in genome, or 26 characters if we are only working with the English words, or maybe alphanumeric characters. Then there will be 26 small letters, 26 big letters, and 10 digits. But sometimes the alphabet can be very, very big, such as Unicode. And in this case, counting sort might not be appropriate. If your string, for example, has only 1000 characters, but those are all Unicode and the alphabet size is a few million characters, then maybe you could sort the characters of the string in a more efficient way. Apart from sorting the characters, we will also need additional information to make the following steps of the algorithm more efficient. And to do that, we introduce equivalence classes of the partial cyclic shifts. So we denote by C with index I partial cyclic shift of length L, where L is the current length of the cyclic shifts which we already have sorted. And initially we have sorted single characters, so L is equal to 1. And then on the further phases of the algorithm, L will increase from 1 to 2 to 4 and so on, twice on each iteration. So some of the cyclic shifts can be equal to different cyclic shifts starting in different positions. So Ci can be equal to Cj, and then they should be in the same equivalence class. So to assign equivalence classes, we define the array class, and class of I is equal to the number of different cyclic shifts of length L that are strictly smaller than the cyclic shift starting in position I. So for different cyclic shifts which are equal, the value of class I and class J will be the same, because the same other cyclic shifts are smaller than these two equal cyclic shifts. And we'll need to compute this array class to increase the speed of the next phases. And before computing this array class, we assume that we have already sorted all the cyclic shifts of the current length L. So how to actually compute the classes of the cyclic shifts when we already know their order? Let's look at the example of sorted characters of the string. So we know already that the characters are sorted and their order is 6, 0, 2, 4, 5, 1, and 3. Now let's assign classes. We want to assign class 0 to the smallest of the cyclic shifts of the current length, which is $, which is in position 6. So we write 0 in position 6 of the array class. And we initially set up array class to be of length equal to the length of the string, of course. The next smallest cyclic shift is letter A, and it is different from the previous smallest one, which is $. So we need a new equivalence class for A. And so we assign 1 to the equivalence class of A, which is in position 0 in the initial string. So we assign 1 to class of 0. And the next one is also A, which is already in position 2, but it is equal to the previous one. So we assign the same equivalence class to it. So we write down 1 as the value of class of 2. The next one is also A, it is also equal to the previous one, so we assign 1 to class of 4, and the same one we do with class of 5. And the next one is B, which is different again from the previous one, and so we assign new class, which is bigger by 1, which is 2. So we assign 2 to the value of class of 1, because B we find in position 1. So class of 1 we assign to value 2. And then the last one is also B, it is equal to the previous one, so we again assign 2 to class of 3. And now we know the classes of all the single character cyclic shifts. We know that the smallest one is $, and it is the only one in the class 0. We know that 4 A's are in the equivalence class 1, and we know that 2 B's are in the equivalence class 2. And here is the pseudocode for the algorithm compute char classes, which takes as inputs string s and the order of the characters and computes the equivalence classes just for single character cyclic shifts of the string s given their order. So we initialize the array class with just an array of size equal to the length of the string s, and that will be our return value. We also initialize the first value of this class array, but we don't initialize class of 0. We initialize class of order of 0, because order of 0 is the position in which the smallest character in the string occurs, and we initialize this character with class 0. So we assign class of order of 0 to 0, saying that the character in position order of 0 has equivalence class of 0. And then starting from the second character in order and up to the end, we go through the characters of the string in order, and we assign classes. To assign a class to a new character, we compare it with the previous one in the order. If it's different from the previous one, it means it's bigger, because we go through them in the order. And so we need a new class. And so we just take the value of the previous class, increase it by 1, and assign to the class of this character. Otherwise, if this character is the same as the previous one, we don't need to create a new class, we just assign the same class as the class of the previous character. And in the end, we return the array with the classes. And we state that the running time of this algorithm is linear, which is obvious because we only have initialization of the array and then for loop which runs for linear number of iterations with constant number of actions performed in each iteration of the for loop. And that's all for the initialization phase of the suffix array construction. And in the next video we'll learn the transition phase from the current length to twice the length of the cyclic shifts. Hi! In this video you will learn how to implement the transition phase of the suffix array construction algorithm. In the transition phase, you assume that you have already sorted cyclic shifts of some length L, and you know not only their order but also their equivalence classes, and you need to sort based on that cyclic shifts of length 2L. The main idea is the following. Let's denote by Ci cyclic shift of length L starting in position I, and by Ci prime the doubled cyclic shift starting in I, that is cyclic shift of length 2L starting in position I. Then Ci prime is equal to Ci concatenated with Ci plus L. So we just take string Ci, we take string Ci plus L, put it after string Ci, and the total string of length 2L is equal to string Ci prime. And so to compare Ci prime with Cj prime, it's sufficient to separately compare Ci with Cj and Ci plus L with Cj plus L. And we already know the order of the cyclic shifts of length L. So instead of comparing them directly, we can just look in the array of their order and determine which one is before which one, and that one is going to be smaller or the same as the other one. And also we have the array with equivalence classes, and so we can determine whether two cyclic shifts of length L are really equal or they're different by looking in the array for equivalence classes and comparing their equivalence classes. So basically we can compare two cyclic shifts of length L in constant time, and that is why we can sort the doubled cyclic shifts faster. For example, if S is our initial string $, and the current length L is 2, and position I is also 2, then Ci is C2 is a cyclic shift starting in position 2, which is AB. Ci plus L is C2 plus 2, which is C4, which is AA. And Ci prime is equal to ABAA. So this is the distinction between cyclic shifts of length L and 2L, and how we combine C2 and C4 to get C prime 2. So now we have to think about the following problem. We need to sort pairs of numbers basically, because each cyclic shift of length L corresponds to its number of position in the order of all cyclic shifts of length L. And we first need to sort by second element of pair, and then we stable sort by the first element of pair. And if we do these two steps, then our pairs will be sorted, because they will be sorted by first element, and also inside the equal first elements, it will be sorted by the second element, because it was initially sorted by the second element and the sort is stable, so it didn't break the order of the second elements in the case when the first elements are the same. So this is the idea for sorting pairs of objects. And let's look at this example. So let's suppose our current length is 2, and we've already sorted all the cyclic shifts of length 2, and they are to the right in the sorted order. Now, for each of the cyclic shifts of length 2, let's look at the cyclic shift of length 4, which ends in this cyclic shift of length 2. So we take the two previous characters and add them to the left. So C4 prime ends in C6, and also we look at C5, we take the two previous characters, and C3 prime ends in C5, and so on. So we go by two characters to the left from each of the cyclic shifts of length 2, and we get a set of cyclic shifts of length 4. Now we have highlighted in yellow the first elements of the pairs, which are also cyclic shifts of length 2. Those are not sorted, but we know their starting positions, and we know what are the correct starting positions in the sorted order. So we can reorder this list of cyclic shifts of length 4 by the order of the first halves of the elements in this list, using the known order. And we will need to do so in a stable sort fashion, so that if, for example, C2 prime is before C0 prime, and the first half of C2 prime and C0 prime are the same, they need to stay in the same order in the final sort. And the same goes about C3 prime and C1 prime. They both start in BA. So when we sort by the first half, C3 prime has to stay before C1 prime. That's our requirement. So suppose we managed to sort the first halves in such a way, and we sorted the whole cyclic shifts of length 4 accordingly. What we get? We actually get the sorted list of cyclic shifts of length 4. And of course, for those which differ in the first half, it's obvious that they compare in the correct order. But for those which are the same in the first half, their second half is also sorted because it was sorted initially in the second column. And we implemented a stable sort. So C2 prime is still before C0 prime, and C3 prime is still before C1 prime. So this is the idea for sorting doubled cyclic shifts. We take Ci prime, which is a double cyclic shift starting in position I, and we know that it's a pair of Ci and Ci plus L. And we already know that the single cyclic shifts are already sorted. C order 0 is the smallest one, and C order length of S minus 1 is the biggest one. Now let's take the doubled cyclic shift starting exactly L to the left, counterclockwise from those, and then C prime order of 0 minus L, C prime order of 1 minus L, and so on, are sorted by second element of the pair of single cyclic shift, sorted already. And when I decrease order of 0 by L, I mean decrease modulo the length of the string, because this is a cyclic string, so we need to do a cyclic subtraction. So we get these C prime order 0 minus L and so on sorted by the second element of a pair, and we need only a stable sort by first elements of pairs. But we know that counting sort is stable, and we know equivalence classes of single shifts for the counting sort, and we know that there are not many different single shifts. At most, their number of different single shifts is length of string. So we can again use counting sort to sort those equivalence classes of the single shifts. Now let's consider the pseudocode for the procedure sort doubled, which will sort the doubled cyclic shifts of length 2L given the string S, the current length L, the order of the cyclic shifts of length L, and their equivalence classes in the array class. We start with initializing the array count with the 0 array of size equal to the length of the string. This is the standard array for counting sort, but as opposed to sort characters procedure, it will sort not characters but equivalence classes of cyclic shifts of length L. And there are at most length of S different equivalence classes. That's why we initialize the array with size length of the string, as opposed to sort characters where we initialized it with size of the alphabet. We will also need another array new order, which will store our answer. It will be the order of the sorted doubled cyclic shifts. We initialize it with array of size length of s. The next two for loops are standard for loops for the counting sort, where we first count the number of occurrences of each equivalence class of single cyclic shifts, and then we compute the partial sums of that counting array. And the last for loop of the counting sort needs to go through the array we're going to sort from the end to the beginning. And that is important for the sort to be stable. So we need to go through the array of doubled cyclic shifts, which are initially sorted by their second half in the reverse order. But we don't want to actually build this array of doubled cyclic shifts and then go through it in reverse order. We want to only build this array in our head, and in the code we just want to go through this array in the reverse order. So how to do that? Remember that we have the array order, and if we go in the direct order of this array, we will go through all the cyclic shifts of length L in increasing order. What we need instead is first to go not through cyclic shifts of length L, but through cyclic shifts of length 2L, which starts exactly L counterclockwise from those. And that is why we decrease order I by L and add length of the string and take modulo S just because we are going through a circle. And we need to go downwards from the last I to the first I, because we need to go in the reversed order. So these two lines, for I from length of S minus 1 down to 0, and the next line which assigns variable start to order I minus L plus length of string S modulo S, what they basically do is they go with variable start in the reverse order through the array of doubled cyclic shifts sorted by their second half. So start goes through the starts of those double cyclic shifts in the reverse order. Now everything else that happens in this for loop is just regular counting sort. We take the class of this start position, which is the class of the first half of the corresponding doubled shift by which we want to sort. Then we go and decrease the partial sum corresponding to that equivalence class in our counting array. And then we just put our start in the position which the counting sort prescribes to it. So these three lines from getting the class of the start position, decreasing the partial sum, and assigning the start to the position counter of class are the three standard lines of the counting sort. The complexity here is that start is going in the reversed order through the array of doubled cyclic shifts sorted by their second half, and that we, instead of comparing characters or something else, we compare equivalence classes of the single cyclic shifts. So this is what this last for loop does, and in the end what you have is the array new order, which contains the doubled cyclic shifts which were initially sorted by their second half, and then we sorted them by counting sort by their first half, and so now they are sorted by the first half, and the counting sort was stable, so in case when their first half is the same, they're also sorted by the second half, because they were sorted by second half initially. So new order finally contains all the doubled cyclic shifts in the correct order, in the sorted order. So this is the function that sorts all the doubled cyclic shift, and the running time of this procedure is linear, because this is basically the regular counting sort. Although it sorts very complex objects, in practice in the code it just sorts integers. The equivalence classes of the single cyclic shifts, and it does so in the running time of the counting sort, which runs in the time number of items plus number of different values. Number of items is equal to the length of the string, and the number of different values of equivalence classes is also at most length of the string. So all in all, those 3 for loops run in linear time. And in the next video, we will talk about how to update the classes of those doubled cyclic shifts after they are sorted, and how to finally build the suffix array from scratch. Hi, in this video you will learn how to update the equivalence classes of the doubled cyclic shifts after sorting them, and that will be the last step before we can actually present the whole algorithm for building the suffix array. So, to update classes, we need to compare the pairs of single shifts which constitute the doubled cyclic shifts which we have just sorted. We have already sorted the pairs, so we just need to go through them in order and compare each pair to the previous pair. If it's the same, then we need to assign it to the same class. If it's bigger, then we need to create a new class and assign it to this pair. To compare the pairs, we can compare them separately by first element and then by second element. Of course, the elements of the pairs are cyclic shifts, and we don't want to compare them directly character by character. But for that, we already know their equivalence classes of the single cyclic shifts, and we can just compare the equivalence classes instead of the cyclic shifts themselves. So we can compare any 2 pairs of single cyclic shifts in constant time. Let's look at an example. S is our initial string, and suppose we've already sorted the doubled cyclic shifts of length 2, and our initial cyclic shifts were of length 1. So we have our array class of the equivalence classes of the cyclic shifts of length 1, which are basically letters. And remember that this array has one element which is equal to 0, which corresponds to the $, and it is in position 6. We have 4 elements which are equal to 1, which correspond to letters A in positions 0, 2, 4, and 5. And we have 2 elements which are equal to 2, which correspond to letters B in positions 1 and 3. So these are the equivalence classes of the single cyclic shifts. Now, for the double cyclic shifts, we can write them down in the order because we've already sorted them, and we know the new order, which is the order of the doubled cyclic shifts. They go 6, 5, 4, 0, 2, 1, 3, from $A to BA. And along with each doubled cyclic shift, we also write down the pair of the equivalence classes of its halves. For example, for $A, the equivalence class for $, is 0, and the equivalence class for A is 1. So it corresponds to pair 0, 1. And for AB, for example, the equivalence class of A is 1, and the equivalence class of B is 2. So we write down the pair 1, 2. These are the pairs of the equivalence classes of the single cyclic shifts. And now we need to compute the equivalence classes of the doubled cyclic shifts and write them down into the array new class. To do that, we go through the doubled cyclic shifts in the sorted order using array new order. And we start from the first one, which is $A, and we write down value 0 for its class in position 6, because it is in position 6, as we see from the array new order. Then we proceed to the next doubled cyclic shift, and to assign class to it, we need to compare it to the previous one. And of course, on this picture, we could compare directly this doubled cyclic shift to the previous one and determine that is different. But in practice, in general situation, we don't want to do that. And instead of comparing the cyclic shift directly, we compare the pairs of numbers written to the right from them. And we see that the pair 1, 0 is different from the pair 0, 1. And we do this comparison just by 2 comparisons of numbers, instead of comparing full cyclic shifts. As far as this doubled cyclic shift is different, we need a new class for it, and we assign it to class 1, and we write it into position 5 because this is the position for this double cyclic shift, as we see from array new order. Then we proceed to the next one, which is AA. We again compare it with the previous one by pairs. 1, 1 and 1, 0 are different pairs. So we write down a new class again, class 2, in position 4, as given in the array new order. Then we proceed to AB. It is again different. 1, 2 is different from 1, 1. So we create a new class 3 and put it in position 0, as given by array new order. Then we look at AB again, and it is the same as the previous AB, as we see from pairs 1, 2, 1, 2, which are equal. So we don't need to create a new class. We write down the same class 3 into position 2, as given by the array new order. Then we look at BA. It is different from AB, so we create a new class 4. And then the second BA is, of course, equal to the previous BA, so we write down 4 in position 3, as given by the new order array. So this is how it works, updating of the classes. Now let's look at the code. So the procedure update classes does exactly the same as we did in the example. It takes as input array new order, the order of the doubled cyclic shifts. It also takes classes of the single cyclic shifts, and also it takes the length of the single cyclic shifts as inputs, and it will return the array with equivalence classes of the doubled cyclic shifts as a result. First we initialize variable n with the size of new order. Basically n will be equal to the length of the string, but we don't have string as an input, so we need variable to compute its length. And we initialize the array new class with an array of size n. And first we assign class 0 to the smallest doubled cyclic shift, which is given by new order of 0. And then we go through all the doubled cyclic shifts from position 1 to n-1. And we need to compare the doubled cyclic shift number I with the doubled cyclic shift number i-1. To do that, we first compute their starting positions. Kur is the starting positions of the doubled cyclic shift number I, and prev is the position of the previous one. And we also need to compute the positions of their middle, of the position where their second half starts. So we need to compare them half by half. So Kur and Prev are the starting positions of the doubled cyclic shifts, and mid Prev are the starting positions of their second halves. To compute them, we just take the position clockwise to the right by L. So we add L and take everything modulo n, which is the length of the string. And now we do just what we did in the example. We compare the classes of the current position and the previous position, and the classes of the starting positions of the second halves. If at least one of the halves is different, it means that the pair is different from the previous one, and we need to create a new class, increase the current class by 1 and assign it to the current position. Otherwise, the pair is the same as the previous one, and we don't need to create a new class, we just assign the same class to the current position. And in the end, we return the array with the new classes of the doubled cyclic shifts. We state that the running time of this algorithm update classes is linear, and that's easy to prove because we basically only have one for loop with linear number of iterations and constant time operations happening inside. Now to the full algorithm for building the suffix array, finally. So procedure build suffix array takes in only string s and returns the order of the cyclic shifts or of the suffixes of this string. We assume that s already has $ in the end, and $ is smaller than all the characters in the string. We start with sorting the characters, single character cyclic shifts of s, and save the result in the array order, and also compute the equivalence classes of those characters and save the result in the array class. And we initialize the current length as 1. And then we have the main loop, which proceeds while the current length is still strictly less than the length of the string. If it is, then we first need to sort the doubled cyclic shifts of length 2L, and then we also need to update their equivalence classes so that the next iteration can use them to again sort the doubled cyclic shifts. And then we just multiply L by 2 and go on in our while loop until we get to the situation when L is more than or equal to the length of S. And by that time, array order will contain the correct order of all the full cyclic shifts of the string S, which is the same as the correct order of all the suffixes of the string S if it has a dollar on the end. And the running time of build suffix array procedure is length of S times logarithm of that plus size of the alphabet. So the size of the alphabet is because of the counting sort of characters in the beginning, because we've sorted them in time proportional to length of the string plus size of the alphabet. But if we wanted, we could just sort them in time S log S without using the counting sort to sort the characters. So we could actually remove the plus alphabet from the build suffix array asymptotics. Although in practice, usually the alphabet is very small, so we don't need to do that, and using counting sort is better than actually sorting the characters in S log S. And we also compute the classes of the characters in linear time after that. In each while loop iteration, we do both sorting of the doubled cyclic shifts and update their classes in linear time. And we have only logarithmic number of iterations because L is doubled every iteration, and as soon as it gets at least S or more, we stop. So it's only logarithmic number of iterations. So all in all, the while loop runs for S log S, and adding to that the initialization cost, we get S log S plus size of the alphabet. So now you finally can build suffix array of a string S in time length of S times logarithm of that, using linear amount of memory. And you can do not only that, but you can also sort all cyclic shifts of a string in the same time. And you know that suffix array enables many fast operations with the string. And also, in the next lesson, you will learn to build suffix tree of the string from its suffix array in linear time. And that combined will give you an algorithm to build suffix tree in time S log S. And of course, you already knew how to build a suffix tree in quadratic time, but S log S is much, much better than that. So you will learn that in the next lesson. Hi, in this lesson you will learn how to build suffix tree of a string given its suffix array in linear time. At first, we'll explore some connections between suffix array and suffix tree. And then we'll learn to compute some additional information to the suffix array. And then finally, we will use suffix array and that additional information called LCP array to build the suffix tree. First, recall the problem. It's very simple. You're given a string S and you need to compute its suffix tree. And you already know how to do that actually, but the algorithm you know works in squared time, and so it will work only for short strings, maybe up to 1000 or 10,000 characters. And if you want to build suffix tree for strings of length of millions or billions, you will need a much faster algorithm. And after you learn this lesson, you will know how to build suffix tree in time length of string times logarithm of this length, because you can build suffix array in this time and then construct suffix tree from the suffix array in linear time. So the general plan is to construct suffix array in time S log S, then compute some additional information called LCP array in the linear time, and then given both suffix array and this additional information, construct the suffix tree in linear time. First, let's explore how suffix array and suffix tree are connected. Here we have a string S, ABA, BAA dollar, and again we insert a dollar in the end, which is smaller than any of the characters of the string, both to build suffix array and then to build suffix tree from it. And on the left we have in the column all the suffixes of the string S sorted in lexicographic order. So that is basically the suffix array. And on the right we have the fully built suffix tree of the string, which is already compressed, so that you see that on the edges we have not single letters but whole substrings of string S. And by the way, interesting question is, how do we store suffix tree? We shouldn't, of course, store the substrings that are written on the edges directly, because that could lead to quadratic memory usage, and we want linear memory usage. So instead of storing the substrings themselves, we just store the index of the start and index of the end of the corresponding substring. So for each edge, we store two indices, start of that edge in the string and end of that edge in the string. And to store the nodes, we just store, for example, an array of pointers to the children nodes, and that array is indexed by the first character of the edge outgoing from this node into the child. And we can store the information about the edge itself in the node for which this edge is going from its parent. This is one of the ways to store everything, but you may organize everything in another way. The important thing is that you shouldn't store edges as substrings. So, what corresponds in the suffix tree to the suffix array elements? Let's take the first element of the suffix array. Actually, it is corresponding to suffix in the string s, and that is corresponding to a leaf in the suffix tree, and also to the path from a root vertex to the corresponding leaf vertex in the tree. So the first element of the suffix array corresponds to this root highlighted in blue, and then if we go to the next element of the suffix array, we get another root from root vertex to the leaf number 1. And then if we go to the next element, we get root from the root vertex to the leaf number 2. And note that the indices of the leaves and the indices of the suffixes are just in the sorted order. So those are not positions in the string s, those are numbers of the suffixes in the increasing order, from 0 to number of the suffixes -1. So each of the elements of the suffix array corresponds to some path from root to leaf in the suffix tree. That is what we know. That is unfortunately not yet sufficient to build the tree from the suffix array, because there are many ways to create some paths from root to different nodes which correspond to suffixes of the suffix array. So we will need some additional properties. And this additional property we need is called longest common prefix, or often it is just said as LCP. So LCP of two strings s and t is the longest such string u that it is both a prefix of s and of t. And we denote by big LCP of st the function which returns the length of the LCP of strings s and t. For example, LCP of AB, ABC and ABC is 2 because their longest common prefix is AB and its length is 2. And LCP of strings A and B is 0 because their longest common prefix is empty. Now let's look again at the suffix array and suffix tree and also take into account LCP between the neighboring elements of the suffix array. So when we look at the first element of the suffix array, we just have an edge corresponding to it in the suffix tree. And when we have the next element, we have a path from root to another vertex. But if we compute the longest common prefix of this element of the suffix array with the previous element of the suffix array, we'll see that this longest common prefix is empty. And that corresponds to empty intersection between the previous path and the new path. The only common node is the root node, and they don't have any edges in the intersection. However, if we proceed to the next suffix, it has a common prefix of length 1 with the previous suffix, and it corresponds to the common path in the tree, highlighted in yellow, starting in the root node and going through edge A to another node, which is still a common node for the current suffix and the previous one. So this is how LCP corresponds to the tree. If you go to the next suffix, it again has the same longest common prefix with the previous suffix. So we have the same common path from root to the next node by edge A, and then the part of the path is different from the current suffix and from the previous one. If we go to the next suffix, there longest common prefix with the previous one is even longer, and so the common part of the path is now consisting of 3 nodes and 2 edges. Root node, next node by edge A, and next node by edge BA. And the rest of the path is unique to the current suffix. If we go to the next suffix, it again doesn't have any common prefix with the previous one, so the only common in the path is the root node. And the next suffix has a longest common prefix of BA, and that's why we see this path from root to another node via edge BA, and this is the common part of the path for the current suffix and the previous one. So we see that basically all the nodes but the leaves are corresponding to the longest common prefix of the neighboring suffixes in the suffix array. And this is how we can actually build the suffix tree, by first computing the longest common prefixes of the neighboring elements in the suffix array, and then building those internal nodes, and then in the way of that we will also build the leaves as the ending points of the paths corresponding to the suffixes from the suffix array. So this is the plan of what we'll do. But first we'll need to compute those longest common prefixes for the elements of the suffix array. So we define LCP array, and let's consider suffix array A of string S in the raw form, that is that A0 is a suffix, A1 is a suffix, and so on up to A length of S minus 1. All those are suffixes of S in lexicographic order. Then LCP array of string S is the array LCP small of size length of S minus 1. It contains fewer elements than the suffix array and then the string itself, such that each element LCP of I is just equal to the longest common prefix length between AI and AI plus 1. So it's the longest common prefix of 2 neighboring elements in the suffix array. And what we want is to compute the values of this array. For example, if we have our string ABA then we first compute the longest common prefix of $, and $A, which is 0. Then we compute the longest common prefix of $A and $AA, which is A of length 1. Then it's again A of length 1. Then it's ABA of length 3. Then it's empty. And then it's BA of length 2. So the LCP array for this string is 011302. And the central LCP array property, which will enable us to compute it fast, is that for any indices I and j in the suffix array, where I is less than j, the longest common prefix between AI and AJ, which are far from each other, is not bigger than the LCP of I, which is basically the longest common prefix of I and the next element. So what I'm saying with this lemma is that the LCP of 2 neighboring elements is always at least as big as the LCP of the first one of them with any of the next elements. And the same goes the other way. The LCP of 2 neighboring elements is at least the same as LCP of the second of them with any of the previous ones. And to see that, let's look at some hypothetical example that we have some long suffix array and elements I and I plus 1 are here, and also there is some element j farther in the suffix array. And we see that really the common prefix of suffixes I and I plus 1 is pretty long. And it's not so long with the suffix j, it's only of length 2, but this example doesn't yet prove anything. So maybe for some other situation with the suffix number I plus 1, it could be so that the common prefix of I and j will be bigger than common prefix of I and I plus 1. So let's suppose that. And we don't know what is suffix I plus 1, so we just replaced it with many x's. X is some unknown letter. We know that the LCP of I and j is equal to 2. So let's consider k, which is the length of the longest common prefix of AI and AI plus 1, and we suppose that it is smaller than 2 in this case. So how can that be? One variant is if AI plus 1 is shorter than 2, and then AI plus 1 is actually a prefix of AI, but in this case AI plus 1 is smaller than AI, which contradicts the property of the suffix array that the suffixes are sorted. And if suffix I plus 1 is sufficiently long, then it follows that its kth character is different from the kth character of both ith suffix and jth suffix. And in this case there are again two cases. In the first case is that this character in suffix I plus 1 is bigger than the corresponding one in strings I and j, but from this it immediately follows that suffix I plus 1 is bigger than suffix j, which contradicts the suffix array property, so it is impossible. And another case is that this character is less than the corresponding character in both strings I and j, but in this case it immediately follows that AI is bigger than AI plus 1, which again contradicts the suffix array property. So in all cases we found a contradiction, and so it is not possible that the longest common prefix of I and j is bigger than the longest common prefix of I and I plus 1. And we proved the LCP array property because for the symmetric case the proof is analogous. Now, how do we compute the LCP array? One variant is to go for each I, compare AI and AI plus 1 character by character and compute the LCP directly. But this will work linear time for each I, and in total it will be length of the string squared, and we want to compute everything in linear time. So how to do that faster? And you will learn that in the next video. Hi! In this video you will learn how to compute LCP array in linear time. And the main idea is the following. We start by computing LCP of the first two smallest suffixes directly, by comparing them character by character. But then, on each next iteration, instead of going to the next pair of suffixes in the suffix array, we move the smaller suffix in the string one position to the right, and then compute its LCP with the next suffix in the suffix array. So we won't go in good order in the suffix array, we will go in some strange order, but this order is good. We will show that if we go in this order through the smaller suffixes, then the LCP of the smaller suffix and the next suffix will decrease by at most 1 on each iteration. And so we will know that most of the characters of the two new suffixes we've already compared. We've already compared many of them, and we don't need to compare them again. And we'll start from there, and we'll compare the next character and the next one directly, and the LCP itself will be very easy to compute, because we will still do that by direct comparison of characters with characters. We'll just avoid some of the comparisons, because we will know from the previous iterations that the common prefix has at least such length, and we don't need to compare the first such many characters. And in the end, it turns out this will work in linear time. So we'll denote by an of I the suffix starting in the next position in the string after suffix AI in the suffix array. So the next one in the suffix array would be AI plus 1. But we want not that one, but the one which starts in the string one position to the right. So here's an example. We have a string S which is AB, ABD, ABC, and the smallest suffix is AB, ABD, ABC. The whole string is actually the smallest suffix. And the next one in the suffix array is ABC. And their longest common prefix is AB. And here we see it. And we compute this longest common prefix, which is equal to 2 by length, directly. And then we will know that if we move to the next two suffixes in the string, to the next one after A0 and the next one after A1, those will both start with letter B. So the length of the common prefix decreased by at most 1, because both suffixes just moved one position to the right, and we cut away only one position of the longest common prefix. Of course, these two suffixes are not probably two neighboring suffixes in the suffix array in the general situation. It might be so that there is some suffix between them. But because of the property of the LCP array, the longest common prefix of the smaller suffix with the next suffix in the suffix array will be even bigger, or at least the same as its longest common prefix with the next suffix in the string. Because the next suffix in the string is bigger than the smaller one, and by the property of LCP array, the common prefix with the next element is the same or bigger than the common prefix with some element farther away in the suffix array. So now we can move to the next element from the smaller one and then take the next one to it in the suffix array and compute their LCP directly, but remembering that the first several characters we don't need to compare, exactly those which are in the LCP of the previous pair. So this is basically the algorithm. We compute LCP of A0 and A1 directly and save its value as variable LCP. And then on each iteration, first suffix in the pair, which is smaller, goes to the next in the string. Then we find which one is the next in the suffix array in the order. And we compute their longest common prefix, knowing that we don't need to compare the first LCP minus 1 characters. And then on each comparison, if it's successful, we increase LCP and we go to the next comparison. And we repeat that until we fill the whole LCP array. And the idea is when we make each comparison, we increase LCP. And when we move to the next pair, we decrease LCP by at most 1. And this is why we cannot do too many iterations. So the lemma states that this algorithm computes LCP array in linear time. And to prove that is now easy, because each comparison we do between one suffix and another, it either finishes the iteration, and number of such comparisons is at most number of iterations, and we have at most length of the string iterations. Or if it's a successful comparison, then it increases the current value of variable LCP. And the variable LCP cannot be bigger than the length of the string in any moment. And at each iteration, LCP decreases by at most 1. So if we start from 0, we cannot go higher than length of s, and on each iteration we decrease by at most 1. We cannot do more than linear time of increasing LCP, and so we cannot do more than linear number of comparisons. And this is why this algorithm works in linear time. And as soon as we can now compute the LCP array, we can proceed in the next video to construct the suffix tree given the suffix array and the LCP array. Hi, in this lecture you will finally learn how to build suffix tree of a string given its suffix array and the LCP array. And we'll do everything on this example. We have our string, we have our sorted suffixes in the order, and we start building the tree from just the root vertex. We consider the first suffix and we create a leaf in the tree corresponding to the suffix, and we connect it with edge to the root node. When we go to the next suffix, we see that the longest common prefix of the suffix with the previous one is empty. We know that from the LCP array, and so the only common part of the path from root to the new leaf and to the previous leaf is the root node. So we don't need to create any new nodes other than the leaf node for the new suffix. And we create an edge from root directly to this new node, and we write down the corresponding suffix on this edge. When we go to the next suffix, however, there is already a common prefix of length 1, which is a, so we will need to create a new node in the middle of this last created edge, and it will divide it into edges with letter A and with letter $. And this is what happens. So now we have a new node which is connected with letter A to the root, and from which there are two outgoing edges, one with the letter $, and another with string $, corresponding to the last considered suffix. Now when we consider the next suffix, the longest common prefix with the previous one is again just a, so we don't need to create a new node other than the leaf node. So we create a leaf node for the new suffix $, and we connect it with the yellow node, which corresponds to the longest common prefix with the previous suffix, with an edge where we write $, everything that is left in the suffix. When we consider the next suffix, the longest common prefix with the current one is of length 3, so we will need to subdivide the edge again, and this is what we get. The yellow node is the node corresponding to the longest common prefix ABA of this suffix and the previous one, and then we create a new leaf node for the suffix $, and the node with number 4 corresponding to position 4 in the suffix array. Then we consider the suffix $. It doesn't have any common prefix with the previous one, so it starts from the root and goes into the new node. And then the next one has a common prefix with it, BA, so we create a new node after BA, subdivide the edge, and create a new leaf node for the last suffix with the edge $. So this is basically what is going to happen. How do we implement this creation of new nodes and subdividing of edges? The following way: when we build an edge to the leaf for some suffix, we go and sit in that leaf node. And when we consider the next suffix, we go up from that node using the pointer to the parent node in the tree until we are high enough so that the longest common prefix is below us. As soon as we jumped to the longest common prefix or higher, we stop. How do we know whether we're higher than the longest common prefix or not? We need to also store the depth in the nodes, and the depth is the number of characters on the path from the root to this node. But this is easy to keep during the suffix tree construction, so I'll just assume we have it. So we go up from the leaf until we are in the longest common prefix or above it. If we're exactly in the longest common prefix with the previous suffix, we don't need to build any new nodes. We just build a leaf for the new suffix and connect it with the current node. However, if we're higher than the longest common prefix, then we will need to create a new node in the middle of the current edge, going down from our node in the direction of the longest common prefix. So we divide our edge in the middle, we create a new node which is corresponding to the longest common prefix with the previous suffix, and we create a new leaf node as usual for the suffix and connect it with this new node. So this is the whole algorithm. To repeat, to build the suffix tree from scratch, we first build suffix array and then build LCP array from that. We start building the tree from only root vertex. We grow the first edge for the first suffix just from the root. And then for each next suffix, we're sitting in the leaf we've just built for the previous suffix. We go up from the leaf until we jump higher than LCP with previous suffix. And then we build a new edge and a new leaf for the new suffix, and maybe, depending on where we are in the tree, we need to subdivide the current edge. I state that this algorithm runs in linear time, and that is pretty easy to see. We know that the total number of edges in the suffix tree is linear from the previous modules, and during this process, for each edge, we go at most once down when we build this edge, and then we go at most once up when we go to find the LCP. And then we go again down. We don't go through the same edge again, because we've already been there. So for each edge, we go through this edge at most twice, disregarding maybe additional one per iteration, and we have only linear number of iterations of the whole algorithm. And the time to create a new edge or a new leaf or subdivide an existing edge is constant. So in total, this algorithm works in linear time. So now you are fully equipped to build suffix structures such as suffix array and suffix tree, and you can do that pretty fast in time s log s, where s is the length of the string. And that's cool because you can solve very complex problems using these data structures, which are basically impossible to solve without them. And some of them will be in the programming assignment. So see you there.